This is the age of dying democracies, artificial intelligence, declining intellect, and corrupt powers. The countdown is on. We are now in the 24th hour.
Hello, here we are again, Michael P. America, and this is the fourth episode. And you know what it is. We're talking about the death of American democracy on the 24th hour. That's right, we are in the 24th hour. America is on a fight to save its democracy from the grasp of fascism. As you can see, when man is tempted, he just loses his mind. So, first question I gotta ask you, is it possible to have democracy if freedom for some is denied? Is that actually democracy? Now, this is a question that has been ringing for centuries throughout this country. And I got to tell you, the answer is there is no democracy if some people have rights and others do not. If some people have power and others do not. If you disenfranchise people and you're living on privilege, you do not have a democracy. Okay? So the answer is absolutely no. It is not possible to have democracy if freedom is denied to some people or certain peoples, or a group of people, however you want to phrase it, or a race of people, culture of people, etc. We are all Americans. And that is in the Constitution. Now, people will try to argue, who is specifically determined as a human being. But there's only one race, and that's the human race. So don't fall for it. Okay. Here's another question. Could it be those who practice hatred and division are anti-democratic? I would say definitely. It is written that those who hate their brothers are murderers. Okay, now I just pulled that from the good book because there are a lot of people who call themselves Christians, but they have a lot of hate in them, a lot of vitriol. They're just toxic. And according to the good book, it can't be. It makes you a liar. Murder and destruction are undeniably linked to hatred. Nobody can argue against that. Murder and destruction are undeniably linked to hatred. Now, systemic enforcement of hatred is premeditated by those in power who run the state and those who participate in the justification of this sadistic practice. To tolerate racism only allows it to escalate and become part of your culture, your living experience, and the destruction of the inheritance for the next generation. It will destroy the good things that the next generation is supposed to have. We cannot hate each other. It's just not going to work. There is no progress if we are hating each other and we are destroying. All right? So we need to really understand that. And to not understand that, we can't make it that way. Those who believe they have privilege, and I said this wrong. Those who believe they have the privilege to choose to tolerate or not to tolerate other human beings based on race, gender, etc., instead of choosing to have respect for all human rights as promised by the Constitution, are actually in more peril of self-annihilation based on the acceptance of the false indoctrination perpetrated by those who have waged war against the common man. So maybe that's a mouthful, but play this over and over and listen to what I'm saying. What's happening right now demands all of our attention and all of our direct participation, because we are definitely fighting against fascism, right? So if we want this country to be free, then we must stand up. We must stand up. Now, free people will not remain free if they're not willing to fight for justice and independence. If we save American democracy, we can save the world. So everybody needs to get involved because the threat is at our door. It is knocking heavy. All you got to do is look at the headlines. The headlines say a lot for us, all right? So it's knocking at our door. Now ask yourself, what type of world do you want to live in? Now I can tell you my experience personally, and this is what I have to say on the matter. As I wait to see my country in decline, losing its sense of justice and its humanity, it forces me to think about what kind of world I really want to live in and what type of world I wish to leave my children. There's a saying, leave a place better than it was before you entered it. History shows that the privileged class mainly did not get that memo. Somewhere along the line, they didn't hear that. They didn't understand that. Okay? But we need to make sure loud and clear that they understand. We need to make this planet better than it was before. And the only way we're going to do that is peace and through brotherhood. And I know people think that sounds a little sappy, but we've been trying war for almost since the beginning of time. That has never worked. Everything's been destroyed. Everything, you had to start all over again. Only this time they thought, when we start all over, we're going to steal people's identities. We're going to rename things. We're going to withhold knowledge. And, we're going to have the power. That's what the real privileged have done. So they wanted to make everybody else ignorant so that they would, quote unquote, have the secrets, that they would, quote unquote, be illuminated. Okay? You always hear that word popping around. Illuminated, Illuminati, Illuminati. It doesn't work. All it speaks to is the insanity of mankind. So you need to understand that. As one of many in the United States who inherited much from the Emancipation Proclamation and the end of Jim Crow laws, I understand the legacy and the struggle of those who came before me. I most certainly do. So I'm going to school late 60s, early 70s. I'm being bussed all over the place. And, I see it. I see what it was. I I know what racism is. I know what hatred is. I also know what forgiveness is. I know what that is. And I know that we have to move forward. Now, the freedom fighters and those who lived, died, and struggled through the civil rights movement, to me, they were the real patriots. They understood firsthand the darkness and the evil in some men. They also understood the need to hold a nation accountable for holding the oath of the great aspirations expressed in the United States Constitution. Meaning that although people of color and the press get such, it's just, they put out so much negativity, we understand and we value this Constitution. And many people actually migrate because of the Constitution. And what I'm saying is that while there's so much havoc all around the world, so much chaos, people are looking for an opportunity to live. Now, we've already talked about why there are chaos in so many other countries. We can thank the, Western European countries. We can thank the United States, for that. And so the craziest thing to me is to get mad because you mess up somebody else's home. And then you're saying, well, we don't want you here. And we're going to ship you back in a worse scenario. Where is your humanity? And that's what we got to ask ourselves. We are losing our humanity. That's crazy. So, like the greatest generation that fought overseas to defend the liberty and the freedom from the threat of Nazi aggression, civil rights pioneers and their freedom fighters fought the great fight against tyranny of sadistic, racist Nazi sympathizers on U.S. soil, where the forces of American evil came together to overthrow the United States government. Now, we've had that conversation about them for like 100 years trying to overthrow the United States government. And it got to the point that by the time that we hit 60s, 70s, and 80s, they had their kids in government, in the higher upper echelons of government, twisting policy. And this is one reason why we have this mess. Okay? So unfortunately for the United States and the world, the fight against those who would make war with humanity and God's creation still exists. And they are threatening humanity once again. They're back. And they're back with a vengeance. Now, as Gil Scott-Heron said, the revolution will not be televised. As we see, there was nothing more truer than this. Because what do we have now? They're totally downplaying it in the media. And, you know, we hear the fake news guy talk about fake news when the news doesn't report things he wants to hear. So now as president, he decided he's going to sue every news outlet. He's going to tie up the courts. He's going to do whatever he can. Unfortunately, I wish he was saying that because he really cared, because, you know, he doesn't care. You know, he's just all about his own power and all about the grifting and could care less. Just like many people who are overprivileged, they just burn up resources until there's nothing left. And then they want a war about it. And, you know, we're looking at that. We got war. We're looking dead at war. Now, in the past, emperors would cite the phrase, "So let it be written, so let it be done." The Constitution as a framework was written, and oftentimes it was the people of the nation that inspired the keepers of the law and the titans of industry to abide by the United States Constitution. All right? It was the people that were pushing for their rights. It wasn't the politicians. The politicians, when you started to threaten them and make them feel like they were going to lose everything, that's when they decided to side with the people. But until then, they were going to side with the wealth, who really just use up resources and burn it all up and complain that the rest of the world is sucking up their oxygen and causing their own problems when you know it's them. You absolutely know it's them. So my existence as a Black American for 60 years as a Black American has been challenging in regard to maintaining a sense of truth, justice, and liberty with the constant constitutional violations and backsliding initiated by those who wish to burn it all down. They just want to burn it all down and destroy progress of all people, mainly people of color. But the bottom line, all people, we're all contributing. Now, growing up, I had to listen to racist indoctrination of privileged racists in the media and in our schools and our churches. And this is very true. You know, it was all in our textbook. It was everywhere. You know, you know, in the old days, if white people were nice to Black people, it was considered not humanity. It was considered they were just being generous, because there was just so much negativity out there against us. And I'm not saying that, you know, they were doing the wrong thing or a bad thing. I'm just saying that's the way it was looked at. You know, we were constantly on guard. We're still on guard right now. And it's a shame that people have to live on guard in their own country, because we still haven't dealt with this cancer of hatred that exists, that is dividing our country into so many pieces, okay? So imagine this. Our history was stolen. Our legacy. They attempted to steal our true inheritance, but that ain't gonna happen. Imagine, to this day, we are the only people on the planet that have no real idea who we are and where we come from. And that is by design. That is totally by design. No other people have experienced this. No other people. Until this day, they lie to us. They lie about us and to the world in order to cover up the atrocities that they continue to commit against us. So here is the downside to all of this, right? If you oppress some, eventually you will getting around to oppressing all, because it really comes down to They want to feel powerful, and they get addicted to it. But they want to keep us divided until they can get everything in play. Now, since the 1400s, slave ships have been carrying Africans to the Americans in the name of globalism, commerce, and profit. And then don't forget the false god. Because they've been using a false god, and they've been doing everything in the name of a false god. Now, they've plundered the South Pacific for gain, and also to keep the world clueless about the other part of the history of Black America. Now imagine, we have built industries, empires, and wealth for the entire European world. We built the infrastructure for America by force, okay? So you got to understand something. We are operating in good faith, wanting to move forward, only to continue building a future for America, but that can only happen if all people are free and America upholds the United States Constitution. Okay, so that's really important. Now we have this insanity that is described as fascism that has gripped this country like a cancer of the spirit. It's plagued the United States for over 100 years. Now, as a nation, we watched Bill Clinton push the country to tolerate the existence of Black Americans, while his wife labeled our innocent youth as super predators, just in an attempt to appease their racist political detractors. And that wasn't enough. Because remember, the prison industrial complex is alive and well, and that beast has to make money. All right? So as the nation's government went to war against the people during the Reagan-Bush years, spreading crack cocaine, crystal meth, and guns on the streets of America, as a matter of policy, the military-industrial complex and the prison industry exploded thanks to the government they bought and paid for. Our government. And so why am I actually going back there? Because I'm going back there because we also saw this, before during the 60s and 70s, and it seems to be part of the playbook. That's part of the playbook of the divide and profit. And they figure that nobody's going to pay attention to the minorities. Forget them, right? And then it's like, well, you should be scared of them anyway. They're all criminals. They're undesirables. They don't want to work. These are all the things that they were throwing at us. But understand this. The real business of wealth is absolute money, power, and domination by any means. Period. So imagine, families were victimized by the politics of racism and poverty, practiced by those in authority for generations to destroy Black progress and the progress of the white underclass. So now it's not just Black people. It's also the white underclass. Now, if white people are somewhere like 64% of the population, and let's say for argument's sake they were even more than that, imagine what that looks like. And do you realize that there's somewhere in the neighborhood of about 90, in prisons right now, between the sexes, it's like 95% male, maybe 3 to 5% female. So if you wonder where all the men are, you're in jail. Right? Or in life, suffering from other things that people in life suffer from because we're all human. And the type of pressure that's being placed on people just to survive. Just remember this, it was Black people in America who were expected to tolerate racism, bigotry, and hatred while enduring a systemic war against the people. The white underclass was vexed into believing that they had to tolerate the existence of minorities in their country with the myth that they created America by themselves and their democratic republic was threatened by minorities looking for a free lunch while they had to work and pay taxes. And so if you buy into that, you can see why folks have an issue. The only problem is that you have to open your eyes and you can see the truth. All right. They blame Black people for their lack of family, which was instituted during slavery and the slave trade, which continues today by means of systemic racism, abuse of justice, and poverty. Their goal was to destroy black families. That was their goal. And it's still out there. But not only are they destroying black families, they're destroying white families, they're destroying Hispanic and Latino families, they're destroying all the families they can, because we're now getting to that prison planet, and they want that. You break the family, you break the community. That's what it's all about, right? The insanity of hate is just that. It's insanity, and in the end, ultimately, it will consume us all. Those who have this evil inside of them have no vision. The only vision they have is a vision of destruction and sadistic desire. They are destroyers. To be black in America is to understand that the war being waged against people, that we're on the front line of the war being waged against the people. Like it or not, the world needs us to be there. And the reason the world needs us to be there, because we're the ones that are calling attention on the front line, letting you know that it's coming for all people. Just like the frogs in the ecosystem, human rights activists sound the alarm when the words of the ecosystem of liberty is being threatened. And guess what? We recently heard two alarms, right? Two alarms coming from the current administration in power. So the first gave us insight into a man's lack of humanity and connection to the human family. This was your president. What did he say? They only talk about the bad things about slavery. Okay, and you feel like there was something good about it? Like you had absolute privilege? You could get away with crimes like you're trying to do now? That you can be as sadistic as you wanted to? You could attack the innocent? Was that good for you? The rape and pillaging of a people? The slaughter? The massacres? The slitting throats, cutting out tongues, the raping of women and children and men? This was what you think is good. The medical experiments, you think that was good? This was not the rambling of a fool, unfortunately. This was a strategic dog whistle to his base. These words alone should prove he is an enemy of democracy and anti-American. Now, the second statement came from his lackey, who believes he has more wisdom than 800 generals who have been operating our nation's defense, most likely longer than he's been alive. He stated, and you know I'm talking about Hexeth, he stated that war is natural to man, that it is man's nature. It is man's nature. So, I'm going to look at what John Steinbeck had to say, the renowned American author, poet, Nobel laureate. Steinbeck once stated, all war is a symptom of man's failure as a thinking animal. So Steinbeck has this to say to you, Hexeth. Failure. You're a failure. Your mindset is a failure. Now, I know you're going to try to, just create as much carnage as possible, and you think that that's successful. But it's really an injustice to humanity that we even have to have this conversation, and you're in a position to chastise 800 generals for doing their job before you even walked. Wow, pretty rude. This is where we're at. Thomas Hobbes said, condition of man is a condition of war of everyone against everyone. I think this is more of the the Trump and I don't think Trump's doing this by himself. I would say the administration, his handlers. It's more about turning everybody against everybody. It's more about division. It's more about fear. It's more about creating anxiety. It's more about destabilizing people's way of life so you can introduce your way of life while you grift. Honestly, I don't think you really care about anybody. So I think it's really all about the destruction that and the carnage that you want to leave as your legacy, because that's exactly the legacy you're going to leave. History, and I know you don't care, but history will not remember you kindly. Because like I said, you guys never last. Look at history. You guys never last. Now, Hobbes believed that without the presence of a strong governing authority, humans would invariably descend into chaos, resulting in a constant struggle for power and resources. And I really think that we don't have that problem until folks are being manipulated. Hobbes' statement emphasizes that the absence of, he was trying to emphasize the absence of cooperation and unity. What he's doing is he's pointing to the underlying sense of the individualistic, self-centered nature of humans. And, he's really saying when left unchecked, people naturally pursue their own interests and exert their own will over others to ensure their survival and prosperity. Okay? Now, in comes a way to cure all of that. Something really important. Empathy. Normally defined as the ability to understand and share the feelings of others. Okay? So, it states that by cultivating empathy, we can shift our perspective from a war of self-interest to one of understanding and compassion. Now it's starting to sound more like humanity. Empathy has the power to bridge the gap between individuals and foster cooperation and collaboration. Tongue-tied again. It also allows us to see beyond our personal desires and consider the well-being of others. Yes, I am my brother's keeper. The well-being of others. If I am my brother's keeper and my brother is my brother's keeper, eventually somebody will be my keeper. It goes round and round and around. Okay? By recognizing the shared struggles and aspirations of our fellow humans, we can transcend the war of everyone against everyone and create a more harmonious existence. It is essential, of course, to acknowledge that achieving such a transformation requires effort and a conscious decision to make empathy a guiding principle in our lives. We have to make an effort to be a part of the human family. That's what it's saying. But if we're all doing it, we can pull each other up. We can make it happen. Okay? By embracing empathy and reimagining our relationship, we can dismantle the war mentality and forge a path towards a more peaceful and inclusive society, and I will say a more evolved society. And these guys that are dreaming about going through the galaxy on spaceships, you might be able to get there because we're not destroying each other. All right? So I would add, there is no evolution in war. There is only the bloodshed of the innocent, and we're watching it right now in Gaza, all these children being murdered, killed. Come on, man. They don't even have rocks. They don't even have buildings. There's not even dust anymore. I mean, you're bombing and bombing and bombing, and really? You need to rethink that. That's not setting Israel free. That's isolating them and creating more enemies and raising up generations of more enemies, which all you're going to do is, if you don't get everyone killed, is feed the war industry. That's what you're going to do. And that's what you are doing. So this last part I borrowed from the SocraticMethod.com. And I thought it was really good. And this is the part about Hobbes. So yeah, I borrowed that because I thought that they were making a good point. All right, so I'm really speaking of winning the war against the altered state, okay? Hegseth's comment is insane and it's incorrect. Man's true nature is not war. Man's true nature is peace. But spirit of man has been co-opted, right? So Hegseth's message was just a dog whistle to his investors at the military industrial complex. That's what that is. That we're going to make you a lot of money. And that's what they're doing. They're going to wage war to ensure absolute profit at the expense of the innocent. So we've already seen how some of that looks. So how it's playing out in Ukraine, how some of that's playing out, in Gaza. And we know all over Africa that's been a thing for a while, but they don't care about Africa. That's their playground, right? Okay. World peace starts at home. One right decision at a time. It is peace versus the altered state. Peace will put evil. Listen to me. Peace will put evil out of business. Why do you think Martin Luther King is dead? Why do you think Gandhi is dead? They already saw the writing on the wall. Everybody goes into peace. They're going to have to find another way to make money. And for them, killing is too easy. And getting people to kill is too easy. Right? So I'm telling you, choose democracy over fascism. You need to do this quick. Because we are in 24th hour. Now, I'd like to actually kind of take a look at some headlines. We've got some headlines, and let's see what people have to say. What's the buzz? Trump's text to CNN. They're thinking about his health again. Does he have health problems? Trump sheds Fox News over the interview with the Senate Democrat, right? Police in Australia are seizing guns. The gun nuts are going crazy. Trump wanted to use Kirk's death to launch a war on terror on the left, but they don't believe him. Ice Barbie moans about agents' lunch options. Of course, privilege. Trump calls top blue state officials scum and around, you know who he's talking about. He's still mad about those felonies he got charged with. They're saying that the president's behavior is unhinged and it's growing increasingly worse. Wow. Foreclosures are surging as U.S. homeowners grapple with rising costs. Yeah, that's the guy that was going to make everything cheap and inexpensive, right? Hey, look out. Government shutdown delays Epstein files vote in the House. Who wanted the government to shut down? To whom's advantage? Wow. Jeffrey challenges Johnson to a primetime debate about the shutdown. He won't accept it. He will not accept it, right? Nailed himself in the nuts. This is Atlantic Black Star. Pete Hegseth issues a threat to military leaders in a fiery speech. Wow. And so we have a lot of things going on. And keep your eyes on the news. And I know it was moving kind of fast, but just keep playing this and you can read them if you want. I'd like you to hear what Miss Jane Fonda has to say about all of this. And so she was on Democracy Now! So I got a clip of that. Check this out.
Anyway, as I was saying, people who have expertise in authoritarianism, well, that clip, that sound made me cry, have said that they are really, really concerned about what they see as one of the most rapid aggressive seizures of power in an industrial democracy. I mean, this is, authoritarians, I'm learning, take about 18 to 22 months to consolidate power. This administration is moving fast, which means we have to move fast. We have to do everything we can to stop what's happening before it becomes the norm, before it becomes institutionalized. And, you know, a lot of sectors of our society are being attacked. But as my father and Judy Garland and scores of other major stars in the 50s knew, freedom is in our bones. Freedom of speech is essential to creatives, to storytellers, as we are. And we're going to fight. And we're going to show we have the capacity, because we're so creative, to come up with CNN, creative, nonviolent, non-cooperation against resistance, and model that for the rest of the country. This is a time, you know, when I accepted my Screen Actors Guild Life Achievement Award, you know, I said, we all watch documentaries of like the lunch counter sit-ins in Mississippi and Tennessee, and people being beaten, dogs attacking them, etc., and wondered, would I have been as brave? This is our documentary moment right now. We don't have to ask ourselves anymore, are we going to be brave enough to stand up? Because the only thing that can stop this is this massive movement of people, nonviolent and unified. And that's what we're trying to encourage and inspire.
That was Miss Jane Fonda letting you know where we're at. So we're having the conversation: fascism, authoritarianism, the decline of American democracy, as you can see on the bottom. And so guess what? That's all I have today. I know I said a mouthful. Play this over and over. We need you to understand what time it is. We are in the 24th hour. I'm Michael Pugh America. I appreciate the fact that you joined me today. We'll see you again.
The 24th hour.